5v5 kinda sucks. And when I say 5v5, I mean our current 1-2-2 role-lock format we're stuck in for the time being. Tank is miserable and easily the least fun role, while also having the most pressure and responsibility of any of the roles. Damage has felt largely cosmetic, only recently becoming very powerful, and that's only because of a very overtuned passive in application. Support has been an insane power trip. The role has been very coddled, despite how problematic it is. And hell, even queue times aren't doing too hot. They are still technically better than the absolute worst of 6v6 roll-lock, while Overwatch was abandoned and left in a poor balance state. But the queue times are still increasing. And in high-level play, Diamond and above, you might as well be queuing late-stage Overwatch 1 with how long those queue times are. Some people waiting 20 minutes to get into a solo queue game. So, the game state sucks. Balance, miserable. And queue times aren't even that much better. What can we do to fix 5v5? 1-2-2 is straight up just an awful, poorly executed fix for queue times, based on data from one of the worst game states Overwatch has had. It's a lazy band-aid solution that has pretty much solely amplified the game's problems and decreased its replayability, especially for tank players. I think 5v5 outside of 1-2-2 does have promise, and we've seen that in plenty of other games, especially MOBAs in a role queue format. And speaking of role queue or role lock, the devs seem pretty insistent on staying in that kind of role lock format, regardless of the numbers of players on each team. And I see why role lock as a format has its pros and cons, mainly providing a more stable gameplay experience and much more consistent team compositions that help in players feeling like they have all of the tools they need to compete more regularly. But as it is right now, 1-2-2 is not it. So a lot of change needs to be made to improve it if the devs want to keep role lock as the main competitive mode in 5v5. And I bring up MOBAs for a reason. There's a lot that we can take from them, and considering that originally Overwatch was birthed through the mixing of MMO, MOBA, and FPS elements, I think that we could use a lot of the similar solutions MOBAs have gotten through the years to really improve Overwatch and make it feel more like itself again, rather than a team deathmatch that is kind of hopeless. When we look at those other team-based games like MOBAs, we see specialized roles to queue for that fulfill different responsibilities and provide different playstyles in a team. Usually 5 unique positions for 5 different players to fill into. Overwatch right now has 3 very unbalanced positions for 5 players to squeeze into. Now, it might sound a little crazy, but I want to expand the roles of Overwatch. Think way back when defense and offense were reworked into the damage role. This was done pretty haphazardly, and because of when it was done and Rolock not existing yet, it was done without any real consideration for the effects that such wonky character distribution would have on future role populations and queue times. So eventually, when Rolock was introduced and there were no changes made, absolutely zero due diligence on Blizzard's part to even out the number of characters per role, we got big queue time issues. It was an iffy idea, done pretty poorly, and it's no surprise it led to those queue time difficulties, especially when balancing game state got worse for the inherently less populated roles, and they started funneling into the damage role, blowing those queues way out of proportion. It really goes to show the lack of understanding from the Overwatch team when it comes to changing some of the game's core systems and stuff like general PvP live service roster and game balance solutions. There is no world where you can go into a role-lock format of 222, or 122, and expect the queue times to be any kind of okay or healthy when one of three roles has more characters than the other two combined. So I want to make more roles, and I'm going to do that by actually committing to the bit and meaningfully shifting a large portion of the roster into more roles to even out that character distribution, along with giving each role their own identity to set the foundation for future balance and varying reworks so that everything better fits into a 5v5 format. What do these roles look like? The 5 roles in total are going to be tank, assault, damage, flex, and support. Each role specializing in either damage negation and space control, pushing and punishing frontline aggression and self-sustain, consistent ranged offensive pressure and opening up or securing kills, utility and peel, and lastly, healing and enabling the team. We take a lesson from MOBAs here, and we have 2 tankier frontline units and 3 damage or utility focused ranged units. More of a MOBA composition as opposed to the deathmatchy, more burst damage focused composition that we have now. And I think all in all, that kind of composition would make for a better game, and it would give the developers the ability to really focus down and pad out some of the game's biggest issues, like certain tanks having way too much damage negation or outright denial, some damage characters being completely useless without counter-swapping, and others being pretty much oppressive, especially when stacking range, and certain supports having way too much defensive utility, eclipsing that of some tanks, and some even having straight-up damage negation on top of very potent healing. These choices seem to be made in spite of design philosophy and balance, and I think setting a more consistent team composition philosophy would help the Overwatch team make better decisions. By redefining the roles and setting clear identities, we can set that foundation for 5v5 and all of the necessary reworks to problematic abilities and characters. So, who is in each role? After rearranging the characters into these new roles based off of playstyles, hero identities, and their estimated pick rates / representative populations, we end up with the following in each role. In tank, I've got D.Va, Mei, Orisa, Ramatra, Rein, Sigma, Winston, and Zarya. All of these characters will remain to be focused on area control, space creation, frontline establishment and exchange, and damage negation. In the new assault role, we'll have Bastion, Cassidy, Doomfist, Junker Queen, Mauga, Reaper, Roadhog, Venture, and Wrecking Ball. Assault heroes will specialize in self-sustain and other selfish or limited forms of damage mitigation, contesting off angles in an off-tankish way, assisting in the offensive pressure of the frontline, and punishing any over-aggression or defensive cooldown misuse. The damage role will keep Ashe, Echo, Genji, Hanzo, Junkrat, Pharah, Sojourn, Tracer, and Widowmaker. Damage heroes will remain especially proficient in providing value to the team with consistent ranged pressure, being able to exploit their range with off angles and secure kills through their role passive or burst damage. In the new flex role, we'll have Ana, Lucio, Soldier 76, Sombra, Symmetra, Torbjorn, and Zenyatta. Flex heroes will be the Swiss Army knives of utility in an Overwatch team, being extremely flexible in how they contribute to the team by providing supplemental forms of sustain and damage, and using their soft CC to peel or assist the team, and having very potent but niche synergies. In the support role, we'll keep Baptiste, Brigitte, Iriari, Kiriko, Mercy, Moira, and Lifeweaver. Supports will remain the backbone of an Overwatch team and provide potent healing, having the ability to save those around them and enabling their team to make powerful plays with strong cooldowns. So we have the characters filled out. Let's talk role passives. The Overwatch team currently seems pretty married to this idea, and while I would remove it if I had the power, I want to play into what the developers actually want to do. So I'm going to provide some ideas for role passives for each of the reworked roles. Tank will have a 50% reduction in critical damage taken. They will also gain a very small amount of ultimate charge from their mitigation stat. The new Assault role's passive will be, after killing or assisting at an enemy's death, Assault heroes are healed for 20% or 10% of their maximum health, respectively. They also gain a small extra bonus to the ult charge generated from their self-healing. The Damage role's passive needs some tuning, because it's kind of ridiculous and lazy in how it's been implemented in live. Instead of just freely giving damage heroes anti-heal on 1 damage from across the map, damage heroes will have to deal 10% or more of an enemy's maximum health within 1 second to inflict them with a 15% anti-heal for 3 seconds. This can stack up to 30% if they deal another instance of 10% or more of the enemy's max health. Additionally, I'm going to give damage characters slightly more ultimate charge on final blows. The new Flex role's passive will be on kill or assist, receive a 100% bonus cooldown reduction for 2 seconds. Additionally, Flex heroes will receive a small bonus to the ultimate charge generated on offensive and defensive assist. The support role will be the only passive left virtually untouched and remain when out of combat, having not taken or dealt damage for 2 seconds, begin regenerating health more quickly. But since there's only going to be one support and they won't have another high healing teammate to save them, I am going to give them a pretty substantial buff in changing the ruling of this passive. Instead of taking priority over the out of combat self-healing shared between all roles, it is going to stack on top of it. So you will receive the support passive healing at 2 seconds, and it will stack with the out of combat self-healing that activates at 5 seconds. Additionally, supports will still receive the most ultimate charge for healing, but also gain a little bit of bonus charge whenever they make a defensive assist or save. And lastly, let's talk out of combat self-healing, which I think is in major need of a rework. Currently, the raw number healing ranges from helpful to potent on squishy characters, but feels virtually worthless on tanks and other beefier characters. I want to change it from a raw number heal to a percentage heal per second to round out how this feels and make the impact of this passive more consistent across the roles should you take the time to activate it. I'm thinking a 5 to 10% of a character's max HP per second. So now that we have a clear idea about the roles, what do estimated player populations look like? Now, this isn't going to be completely accurate since I can only really guesstimate the numbers based off of pick rates, but how I have the characters distributed right now, Tank will have about 17.24% of players, Assault will have around 17.77% of players, Damage will remain the largest at 23.55% of players, Flex will come in second with 21.97% of the community, and Support will have the healthiest estimated population of players at 20.86%. In a perfect world, we'd have completely even distribution of players for all 5 roles at 5% each. It isn't super realistic, but being near that perfect ratio, like support is estimated to be, should be a major goal and can tell us which roles are either underrepresented, overrepresented, and what needs help being more attractive to play for more players. An example would be if tank remains the least fun and most pressured role after all of these changes, and the assault role taking some of that frontline responsibility and returning the frontline exchange, tank might need help in the form of either more autonomy or stronger playmaking or outplay potential, which is great information to know. And since we have those populations, we'll touch briefly on queue times. Queue times are just an inherent part of role lock, and it's just something that we have to accept if we want to have that consistency and stability from a role lock format. Based on the population estimates, queues for tank and assault will be the quickest, damage and flex will have slightly longer queues, and support will be somewhere in between as a baseline queue since it has the healthiest estimated population. There is a lot of math behind this, but I don't think it's super interesting to show, so let me know in the comments if you do want to see like a spreadsheet or its own dedicated shorter video just going over the math behind my queue time reasonings. But for the sake of this video's length, I'm just going to go over the estimated average I have for all roles and how that will decrease going into this alternate version of 5v5 role lock. Currently, the average wait time for casual queues is around 27.42 seconds, and in the upper ranks of competitive, the average wait time is around 9.33 minutes. Since we have these new dedicated roles and a lot of the characters have shifted around and there's more even distribution of estimated populations, I think it's safe to say that we'll probably see a decent decrease in queue times as they are right now. Additionally, I want to discuss a preferred role system that could come with this new version of 5v5 role lock. Overwatch is a very unique game in that you are guaranteed the role you queue for, which exacerbates the fundamental queue time issues in a role lock system's rigidity. Most other games with defined roles allow you to prioritize a role or two with fill automatically active in the background, meaning you are very likely to get the role that you queued for and can definitely still main roles, but you aren't guaranteed the role you queued for and will fill if the queue goes on for too long and enough evenly skilled players are found to create a match. Players will be expected to play the filled role even if no one in the lobby selected such a role. This would help queue times dramatically, allowing the matchmaker a lot more flexibility when creating lobbies, which means more games, more fairness, and much less wait time. It also has the added benefit of making the game less about if you have the best player in the strongest role, and more about how good every player in the lobby is at winning fundamental games of Overwatch, regardless of the character or role they are in. How would this look with ranked though? Virtually, there could be no changes, just the addition of Assault and Flex, and all that comes with that, their own top 500, including them in the UI, etc. But if a preferred role lock system is implemented, we would have to simplify ranked. Since you wouldn't be guaranteed that role, we would need to do away with things such as the separated top 500s and the separated SR and MMR totals. We would return to just one visible rank for your account, similar to OpenQ. This makes every rank much more meaningful and expressive of how good you are at Overwatch as a whole. It also gives top 500 some of its lost luster and makes it a much more elite position, showing true mastery of Overwatch. Another benefit to a system like this is that it helps incentivize grouping and communication throughout and after a game. Since the more people that you queue with and communicate with, the more likely you are to play the role, and you're less likely to fill. And I know filling for a role that you don't want sounds big and scary and not fun, but just like if you fill for a lever, if you fill for a role and play out the complete match, you will be rewarded by being put in the priority queue and being guaranteed one of your preferred roles in your next queue in a gaming session. Additionally, with a preferred role system, a huge quality of life feature I think would need to be implemented would be the ability for players to request to trade a role with a teammate. This allows people to request a swap if they are uncomfortable with a role or truly don't want to play one that they filled for by asking a teammate if anyone else is willing to swap. I imagine it a little bit more limited than other swap systems I've seen in MOBAs, only allowing each player to request a swap once per teammate. So a maximum of 4 requests per player, 1 request per other role. This prevents some of the spamming seen in other games, where someone sits throughout the starting timer of a lobby and just spams over and over and over again for somebody to swap. Importantly, with a change like this, the power of the decision to swap is all on those who are asked, and not the other players trying to avoid. And I know reporting is a bit of a hot topic because of how poorly executed and automated the system is, but with something like this, I do think it would be necessary to also introduce a role avoidance report action, so that if somebody stays in a role that they don't want, but intentionally throws the game because they didn't want to play that goal and would rather throw the match so that it ends early, they will be reportable for throwing the game via role avoidance. All in all, 5v5 role lock, just like 222, hasn't been given a real chance. Plagued by poor development decisions and awful band-aid fixes and poor design and balance philosophies, 5v5's current 122 game state is comparable to 222's releasing with Sigma to usher in double shield levels of throwing that is designed to fail. By fixing character distribution and more clearly defining roles and sharing responsibilities, we do a lot to alleviate 5v5 of its faults, like the unbalanced pressure on tanks to not only force abilities, peel and negate damage, but also command space, be threatening, interact with or be the front line, and eat the worst that the game has to offer. More clearly sharing these responsibilities with the assault role and sharing that visible threat relieves a lot of the pressure tanks feel right now, returning a significant amount of frontline synergies and exchange to Overwatch. In a 1-1-1-1-1 role lock 5v5 format, you also remove the potent stacking of extremely powerful support and denial cooldowns. With only one support, you can't stack incredibly frustrating cooldowns like Life Pull, Suzu, and Lamp anymore. This reduces a lot of the headache and overwhelming tracking and baiting of defensive cooldowns that plagues the vast majority of players, and also allows these abilities to be designed in a more fluid way, since when someone locks one of these immortality supports, that is guaranteed to be the only cooldown of its kind that you'll need to invest in baiting out or playing around. A lot really opens up for these abilities, especially in balance and design. Band-aid fixes like 20+ second cooldowns aren't as necessary when you don't have to worry about them being stacked with other strong denial abilities in their downtime. A format change like this fundamentally addresses those pain points, allowing these characters and abilities to be potent without worrying too much about their oppressive combinations. Damage heroes can now much more reliably contest supports and focus down targets without having to chew through literally hundreds of healing during a fight. And it becomes a lot more of an investment for supports to focus heal a target, since with only one support, that means that there are guaranteed other vulnerable players to pivot to. Supports themselves also become much more open to being pressured, and maybe even eventually killed, since there isn't another one to pump high heals into them while they're vulnerable, instead requiring dedicated and skilled non-healing peel from their flex, tank, or even assault. And in the off chance support does feel underpowered after we give these changes some time, DPS could probably get a different passive to reduce some of that pressure and give healing some more breathing room. Overall, the addition of new roles returns a lot of what makes Overwatch, Overwatch, and reinvigorates playstyles lost in 1.2.2 or made much weaker or obsolete. Both the assault and flex roles have the stats and or utility to have that off-tank playstyle and contest off angles or enable their team to make more aggressive plays and take space. And tank is much more about that main tank experience and having a frontline exchange, being able to outplay and have skill expression in that song and dance. Snipers and stacking range in general is also less of an issue, since the assault role is taking on that beefier off-tank playstyle to actively contest off angles, while tanks can still hold the line and try to deny sightlines. And 2 out of 5 roles have the HP to not die to those similar squishy breakpoints. Tanks don't need to be able to do everything, and we can design more healthy tank characters. You don't need such bloated stats and infinite denial abilities when the pressure and visible threat is shared with the assault role. Each role is more impactful, each having their own ways to synergize, outplay, and provide value, even in the event of a pick. This keeps fights fast and deaths meaningful, but reduces the outright snowball situations of 1.2.2, such as your tank getting blown up and your team just kind of being left hanging dry, unable to stand up to the enemy team if they have their Gigatank. This new 5v5 role lock format has fundamental measures and balances in place to share responsibility so teams aren't bowled over as easily after one player dies. Now, it's a hot topic, so I do want to touch on it lightly, but this could easily be its own video, and this script is already huge, so I'm going to keep this brief. 6v6 and 5v5. Both formats have their merits, and I will admit that I personally think that returning to 6v6 and balancing and designing for that format would be better overall for role queue Overwatch. We are in 5v5 currently, and I'd argue that there hasn't been much done to really make it work. Like I went on about earlier, I sympathize with 5v5 role lock, since I think it isn't being given an honest chance to function. Just like when 6v6 role lock released with SIG and BAP and Brig still being as potent as they were. I'm tired of band-aid fixes, awful solutions, piss-poor balance, and the gameplay and character design seemingly coming second to monetization and content. Team 4 and Blizzard can put as many skins and bundles as they want into the game, but no one will be buying them if the game state feels like shit. So regardless of format, they need to lock in and make this game fun again. This is a bit big of a debut video, but I wanted to set a foundational tone and theme. I plan to follow up this video with more rework suggestions, balancing opinions, maybe even my own character designs in the future. Right now, my next video is either going to be a Doomfist rework suggestion I wrote a long while ago, or I can do a video exploring 4v4 role lock and 5v5 open queue solutions. I could also make another huge video going into what I would actually rework and what balance changes I would make going into this 1.1.1.1 version of 5v5 role lock. So please let me know in the comments which of these options you'd like to see in the future. Also, if you would, please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the video at any point and would like to stick around for that future content. Also, one last call to action here. Please discuss in the comments. Go all in and roast me and tell me how much of a dumbass I am for wanting to change Overwatch if you have to. I fully believe that nothing better will come of this game if we do not take the initiative and voice our concerns and ideas for solutions. Thought without action is nothing. So I encourage everyone to push for positive changes and always remember, never accept the world as it appears to be. Dare to see it for what it could be. Thanks for watching.